Terrell Williams was 37 years old, a licensed roofing contractor who earned a solid $61,000 a year, and he had just learned what his wife's family truly thought of him. The two words echoed in the humid Jacksonville air, sharp and clean as the snap of a chalk line. They sliced through the pleasant buzz of his Milwaukee cordless rotor, through the pride he felt in his work, and lodged themselves deep in his heart. He was standing on the newly rebuilt back porch of his mother-in-law's riverfront home in San Marco, a magnificent, sprawling structure worth a cool $1.2 million. The old porch had been splintered and torn apart by the hurricane that had ripped through a month prior. Terrell had spent the last 3 weekends, every evening after his own grueling 16-hour days and a significant amount of his own money, rebuilding it. He had meticulously sourced marine-grade pressure-treated lumber, used stainless steel fasteners to resist the salty air, and even added elegant chamfers to the edges of the handrails, a detail no one would ever notice but him. The finished product was a work of art. It was stronger, safer, and more beautiful than the original. It was a gift. He had just sunk the last screw, the silence after the drill's whine feeling profound. He stood up, wiping a film of sawdust and sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. His deep brown skin, usually radiant under the Florida sun, was filmed with a pale coat of wood dust. He was tired. His muscles ached with a deep, satisfying thrum, but he was proud. He had done this for Crystal, his wife. He had done it for family. He stepped inside through the open French doors, heading for the kitchen to get a glass of water. The central air was a shock, a blast of expensive refrigerated comfort. The house was silent except for the faint murmur of his wife's voice. Crystal was on the phone, her back to him, looking out the massive picture window at the St. Johns River. He stopped, not wanting to interrupt, and in that moment of stillness, he heard her speaking to her mother, Denise. "I know, Mom. He just finished," Crystal said, her voice a smooth, practiced melody he had always found soothing. He heard Denise's tinny, indistinct reply through the phone. Then Crystal laughed, a light, airy sound that suddenly felt foreign. "I know, it looks amazing. Finally useful. Finally useful." The words weren't shouted. They weren't meant for him. They were a casual, private assessment, an afterthought tossed into a conversation between a mother and daughter, and that's what made them so devastating. Terrell felt the air leave his lungs. He looked down at his hands, calloused and scraped, the knuckles raw from his labor. These hands had fixed his wife's car, assembled their furniture, patched their roof, and now built this palace of a porch. All of it, he now understood, was simply a prelude. All that work, all that service, had just been the audition. And with this final grand act of labor, he had finally passed. He had finally become useful. He didn't get a glass of water. He turned around, his movements quiet and deliberate, and walked back out onto the porch he had just bled and sweated over. The wood was warm under his worn $120 Red Wing boots. He looked at the perfect miter joints, the seamless flow of the deck boards. It was good work. It was his work. But it no longer felt like a gift. It felt like a transaction he hadn't known he was a part of. He walked down the new steps, his footsteps unnervingly solid, got into his 2012 Toyota Camry with its 187,000 miles, and drove away from the $1 million house. He didn't look back. He had no idea then just how deep the betrayal went, or that those two careless words were only the beginning. The facade of their life had been built with the same quiet care Terrell put into his work. Their duplex in Northside Jacksonville was modest, renting for $1,350 a month, a figure that felt both manageable and a constant low-grade pressure on his $61,000 salary. It was a world away from the old money elegance of San Marco, where Crystal grew up. The walls of their small living room were adorned not with expensive art, but with framed photos of their wedding and a cheap $80 print of a beach scene from a big box store. Their furniture was a collection of hand-me-downs and practical pieces from a mid-range store, like the $700 sectional sofa he had painstakingly assembled himself one Saturday afternoon. Terrell showed his love through action. It was the only way he knew. He was the one who woke up at 5:30 a.m. every day. He'd put on the coffee, a simple Maxwell House blend that cost $8 a can, and pack Crystal's lunch while she slept. A turkey sandwich on whole wheat, a bag of baby carrots, a bottle of water. It was a small ritual, a quiet act of service. He was the one who handled the bills, meticulously tracking their expenses in a worn spiral notebook, trying to make his contractor's salary stretch to cover Crystal's more expensive tastes. She worked as a receptionist at a high-end dental practice in Ponte Vedra, a job that paid $38,000 a year but came with the expectation of a certain lifestyle. Her wardrobe was a constant source of tension. A $2,400 Burberry dress she'd bought for a dental conference, claiming it was a professional necessity. A collection of Tory Burch flats, each pair costing upwards of $400. This spending was financed by a constellation of credit cards, their balances hovering around a collective $11,500, a number that kept Terrell awake at night. "It's an investment in my image, honey," she would say, twirling in front of him in a new outfit. "You have to look the part to get ahead." He would nod, trying to understand. His own work clothes consisted of a rotation of 5 identical $40 Carhartt t-shirts and 3 pairs of heavily worn work pants. His prized possession was an $89 Timex watch, its face scratched and its band frayed, but it kept perfect time. The contrast was stark, and it grew sharper during their obligatory Sunday dinners at her mother's house. Denise lived in a world of casual, breathtaking expense. Her San Marco home was a testament to a life lived without budgets. The driveway was home to her white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 vehicle she replaced every 3 years. The interior of the house was a rotating display of new acquisitions. One week, it would be a new $6,000 leather sofa. The next, a piece of abstract art she'd picked up for $3,500 from a local gallery. Dinner conversations were a minefield of quiet humiliations. Denise would hold court, talking about her recent trip to Europe, the rising costs of her yacht club membership, or the disappointing performance of her stock portfolio, which was still valued at over $2 million. She would turn to Terrell, her tone dripping with a kind of patronizing curiosity. "Terrell, dear," she'd said one evening, holding a wine glass that probably cost more than his boots. "Crystal tells me you're working on that big new development over by the airport. Are they paying you well? You must be saving a lot, I hope." Before he could answer, Crystal would jump in. "Mom, Terrell works really hard. He's the best roofer in Jacksonville." It was meant as a defense, but it always landed like a confirmation of his status. He wasn't a businessman. He wasn't an equal. He was the roofer, the man with the strong back and capable hands. Denise would smile, a tight, bloodless expression. "Of course, dear. It's good, honest work. Someone has to do it." Terrell would just eat his food, the expensive catered meal turning to ash in his mouth. He would feel Crystal's hand find his under the table, a small squeeze that was supposed to be comforting, but felt more like a plea for him to remain silent, to not disrupt the fragile peace. He loved his wife. He loved her smile, the way she hummed when she was happy, the warmth of her body next to him in their simple, inexpensive bed at night. But he was beginning to feel like an accessory to her life, a useful tool she could deploy when needed, whether it was to fix a running toilet in their duplex or to provide a grounding, working-class counterpoint to her mother's opulent world. He was the before picture to their after. He brushed these feelings aside, telling himself he was being too sensitive. He told himself that this was just the way families were. There were dynamics, histories, unspoken rules. He was an outsider in their world of inherited wealth and social standing. His worth was measured differently. He just had to work harder, be better, be more useful. He had no idea that they were about to give him the ultimate opportunity to prove it. The hurricane had a name, Ian, but to Terrell, it was just a force of nature that translated into 16-hour days and a phone that never stopped ringing. For a week before the storm made landfall and for months after, his life was a blur of blue tarps, architectural shingles, and the worried faces of homeowners. He moved from one damaged roof to another, his muscles screaming, his body fueled by cheap coffee and gas station sandwiches. It was grueling, exhausting work, but it was his work. He was good at it, and the overtime pay was a welcome relief, a chance to get ahead of Crystal's ever-present credit card bills. The storm largely spared their duplex in Northside, just some downed branches and a flickering power outage. But it had raked its claws across the waterfront properties in San Marco. The call from Crystal came on a Tuesday morning while Terrell was perched precariously on a roof in Arlington, nailing down the last row of shingles. "Honey, it's Mom." Crystal's voice was tight with panic. "Her porch, it's gone. The wind just took it. She's a wreck. Is she okay? Is the house okay?" Terrell asked, his practical mind immediately assessing the situation. "She's fine. The house is fine. But the porch is just a pile of splinters. She's devastated. She spends all her time out there." There was a pause, and Terrell knew what was coming next. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach. "You're so good at building things, Terrell. You could fix it, right? You could make it even better than before." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a directive. There was no discussion of hiring someone, no mention of insurance, no talk of payment. The assumption was clear and absolute. Terrell would handle it. "Crystal, I'm working 7 days a week. My schedule is booked out for the next 3 months," he said, trying to be gentle. "She needs to call her insurance company. They'll have a list of approved contractors." "No, no, no," Crystal said quickly. "You know how those people are. They'll take forever and do a terrible job. Mom needs this done now. For her peace of mind. Please, Terrell? For me?" The weight of those 3 words, "for me," was a pressure he couldn't withstand. It was the emotional currency of their marriage. So he agreed. He told his own waiting clients that a family emergency had come up, pushing their already delayed repairs back even further. He sacrificed his 1 day off, his evenings, his own recovery time. For family. The first Saturday he showed up at Denise's house, she greeted him at the door in a silk dressing gown that probably cost $500. She had a mimosa in her hand. "Terrell, darling," she said, air kissing the space near his cheek. "Thank you for coming. The mess out back is just dreadful. I can't even look at it." She gestured vaguely toward the back of the house before turning her attention to her phone. "I have a brunch reservation at the club. Just do what you need to do. Crystal has a key for you." And with that, she was gone, leaving him standing in the foyer of her immaculate home, smelling of sawdust and sweat. He spent that first day just clearing the debris, carefully salvaging what little lumber was usable and hauling the rest to the curb. It was back-breaking work. The next weekend, he began the rebuild. He wasn't just replacing the porch, he was improving it. He knew the local building codes, especially the stringent ones for waterfront properties. He knew that the original porch had been built with substandard materials, a fact he kept to himself. He spent $3,200 of his own money at the lumber yard, a significant chunk of his savings, on high-grade marine-treated wood and heavy-duty galvanized hardware. He didn't keep the receipt to be reimbursed. It was a gift. During the weeks he labored, his interactions with Denise were minimal and always tinged with her particular brand of condescension. She would emerge from the house occasionally, shielding her eyes from the sun with a perfectly manicured hand. "Is that the right kind of wood, Terrell?" she asked one afternoon, pointing at the stack of premium lumber. "My neighbor Judith had her lanai redone, and they used something called ipe, I think. It's from Brazil. Very expensive. Very durable." "This is the right wood for this application, Denise," Terrell said, his voice tight. "It's treated to resist rot and insects." "Oh, well, if you're sure," she said, her tone implying he clearly wasn't. "It's just, it looks so plain." Crystal, when she was there, tried to run interference. "Mom, Terrell knows what he's doing. He's a professional." But her defense always felt weak, as if she was apologizing for his competence. She'd bring him a bottle of water, a quick peck on the cheek, then disappear back inside to chat with her mother, leaving him alone with the whine of his saw and the growing feeling of resentment. He was a professional. This job, if he had billed it to a regular client, would have cost at least $14,000. That figure included labor, materials, permits, and a modest profit margin. He was giving them $14,000 of his time, his skill, his sweat. He was giving it away for free. He tried to focus on the work itself, the simple satisfaction of a straight cut, a level board, a solid structure rising from the wreckage. He was building something good. He was doing something good. He told himself it would be worth it. The gratitude, the appreciation, the acknowledgement that he was a valued member of the family, that would be his payment. And then, on that final day, with the porch complete and gleaming in the afternoon sun, he walked inside and overheard the two words that vaporized any notion of that payment. Finally, useful. He drove home to his Northside duplex in a daze. The world seemed muted, the colors washed out. When he walked in the door, the smell of their simple life, of laundry detergent and the dinner he had planned to cook, felt like an accusation. He had been a fool. He had been so focused on building things for them, he hadn't seen what they had been building for him. A box labeled The Help. That night when Crystal came home, full of praise for the beautiful porch, he just nodded. He couldn't bring himself to look her in the eye. A cold, hard knot was forming in his chest. It was the foundation for something new he would have to build. Just for himself. The phone call came 2 weeks later at exactly 7:22 a.m. on a Tuesday. Terrell was sitting at his small kitchen table, the one he'd bought for $150, and assembled himself. The early morning light slanted through the blinds, striping the worn linoleum floor. The smell of his $8 Maxwell House coffee filled the air. It was a moment of perfect, ordinary peace, before the world tilted on its axis. The phone buzzed against the tabletop, an unknown number with a local area code. He almost ignored it. It was probably another sales call. But something made him answer. "Hello? Good morning. Am I speaking with Mr. Terrell Williams?" The voice on the other end was male, professional, and unnervingly cheerful. "This is Terrell." "Mr. Williams, my name is John Collins. I'm a claims adjuster with Atlantic Mutual Insurance. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "No, it's fine," Terrell said, a prickle of confusion starting at the back of his neck. He had no policies with Atlantic Mutual. "Excellent. I'm just calling to follow up on a property claim, number 78B45912. The policyholder is a Denise Gable. The claim is for storm damage to a porch at a residence in San Marco. Our records show the repair work was completed, and we're in the final stages of processing the payment. I just have a couple of quick questions to finalize the paperwork." Terrell's blood went cold. He gripped the coffee mug, his knuckles turning white. Denise. The porch. An insurance claim. The pieces started clicking into place. with sickening speed. "Okay," Terrell said, his voice a low croak. He cleared his throat. "Okay." "Great. The claim includes an invoice from the contractor who performed the work, a company by the name of, let's see here, T. Williams Contracting. Is that your company, Mr. Williams?" The name hung in the air between them. T. Williams? Contracting? It sounded plausible, professional, and completely fraudulent. It was a phantom, conjured out of thin air. His phantom. "I am Terrell Williams," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "But I don't have a company with that name. I'm an independent contractor." There was a pause on the other end of the line. The rustle of paper. "Oh, well, that's a bit unusual. The invoice is quite detailed. It's for a total of $14,000, itemizing materials and labor for a complete porch rebuild. It's signed by Crystal Williams on behalf of the contractor." $14,000. The exact figure he had calculated in his head. The value of his gift. They had taken the number, the value of his sweat and skill, and monetized it. They had forged an invoice. His wife had signed it. Terrell felt a wave of nausea. He closed his eyes, the image of Crystal's smiling face flashing in his mind. The way she had praised the porch, the way she had kissed his cheek. It had all been a lie, a performance. "Mr. Williams, are you still there?" Collins's voice was now tinged with concern. "I'm here," Terrell managed to say. The coffee in his mug was cold, but he felt like he was burning from the inside out. "Okay, well, here's the main reason for my call," Collins continued, his professional cheerfulness slightly dimmed. "We need to verify the contractor's license and liability insurance before we can release a payment of this size. The invoice lists your personal contractor license number, which checks out, but we have no record of a business entity called T. Williams Contracting being insured. We can't cut a check for $14,000 to an unlicensed and uninsured entity. It's a liability issue, so I was hoping you could provide me with the certificate of insurance for your company." And there it was, the fatal flaw in their scheme. They were clever enough to steal the value of his labor, to create a fake invoice, to use his name. But they didn't understand the intricacies of his business, the legal requirements, the paperwork. They had underestimated him. They saw a roofer with a strong back, not a licensed professional who understood state regulations and insurance law. In that single, devastating moment, Terrell understood everything. Their praise was a lie. Their gratitude was a performance. Their family was a business, and he was the latest asset to be leveraged. They hadn't just used his body, they had used his name, his reputation, his professional license, and put him at the center of a felony insurance fraud scheme. "Mr. Collins," Terrell said, his voice now steady, clear, and cold as ice. The knot in his chest had hardened from grief into something else entirely, something solid, something he could build on. "I believe there has been a significant misunderstanding regarding this claim. I did the work on that porch, but it was not a commercial transaction. It was a gift to my mother-in-law. There is no T. Williams Contracting. There was no invoice, and there will be no payment." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. The adjuster, who dealt with liars and scammers all day, was speechless. He was hearing the unmistakable sound of the truth. "I see," Collins said finally, his voice stripped of all its earlier bonhomie. "Mr. Williams, this is a very serious situation. Would you be willing to provide a formal statement to that effect?" Terrell looked around his small, quiet kitchen. He saw the life he had built, the simple, honest life he thought he was sharing with his wife. He saw it all for the illusion it was. "Yes," Terrell said, "I would." He hung up the phone. The clock on the microwave read 7:28 a.m. In the space of 6 minutes, his marriage had ended. He didn't know it for sure yet, but he felt it in his bones. The foundation had been ripped out from under him, and he was in free fall. But as he fell, a strange calm descended. They thought he was just a tool. They were about to find out he was the man who owned the entire toolbox. The first rule of war is to never let your enemy know what you are thinking. In the days that followed the 7:22 a.m. phone call, Terrell became a master of strategic restraint. He was an actor in the final tragic scenes of his own marriage, and he played his part to perfection. He moved through his days with a quiet, deliberate calm, a man gathering his strength, hoarding his anger like a precious fuel. The first test came just an hour after he hung up with the adjuster. Crystal called, her voice a symphony of false brightness. "Hey, honey, just calling to say good morning," she chirped. "Big news. Mom is so excited. She said the insurance check should be coming through any day now. Isn't that great?" Terrell was standing in his bedroom, looking at the closet they shared. Her side was a riot of color and expensive fabrics, a collection of $400 dresses and designer shoes. His side was a neat, Spartan row of work shirts and jeans. The divide had never seemed so vast. He forced his own voice to be level, casual. "Oh yeah? That's great news, babe. That'll really help with those credit cards." The words tasted like poison in his mouth. Every normal, husbandly sentence was a lie. Each lie was a small, sharp pain, a reminder of the chasm that had opened between them. "I know, right?" she gushed, completely oblivious. "And we can finally start looking at houses for real. Maybe even something over here in San Marco. Wouldn't that be amazing? To be close to Mom? To be closer to the money," Terrell thought, the coldness spreading through his chest. "Yeah, babe, amazing," he said. He could hear her preening through the phone, already spending the $14,000 that was rightfully his, a sum she believed she had cleverly secured. He had to clench his fist to keep his hand from shaking. "Okay, gotta run. Love you," she said. "Love you too," he replied automatically. He hung up and stared at his own reflection in the cheap $40 mirror on the back of the door. The man looking back at him was a stranger, his face a mask of calm. Inside, a storm was raging. The ultimate performance was that weekend, at the celebration dinner at Denise's house. The air was thick with the scent of roasted rosemary chicken, a $70 bird from a gourmet butcher, and the smug satisfaction of two women who believed they had just pulled off the perfect crime. Denise was holding court, a glass of her favorite $80 a bottle Chardonnay in hand. "It's just so wonderful," she declared, raising her glass. That storm, as awful as it was, turned out to be a blessing in disguise. We get a beautiful new porch, and the insurance company pays for it. It's a win-win. She looked at Terrell and smiled, a gesture that was all teeth. "And we have you to thank for it, Terrell. Your hard work made it all possible." Terrell met her gaze across the polished mahogany of her $8,000 dining table. He saw the glint in her eye, the shared secret smile she exchanged with Crystal. They weren't just celebrating a new porch. They were celebrating their own cleverness. They were celebrating him, his gullibility, his willingness to be used. He took a bite of the chicken. He chewed slowly, deliberately. He focused on the texture, the flavor, anything to keep from screaming. He was a piece of evidence in his own investigation, a silent observer gathering data. He listened as they planned their spending spree. "I'm finally going to pay off that awful Visa card," Crystal said, her eyes shining. The card had a balance of $11,500, a monument to her impulsive spending. "And with what's left over, I saw the most perfect little Cartier watch, just a simple one, a little treat." A simple Cartier watch started at $3,000. Terrell did the math in his head. $14,000 minus $11,500 left $2,500. Not enough? She was already spending money she didn't have, money that didn't exist. Denise, meanwhile, was planning a kitchen renovation. This little windfall will be the perfect seed money, she said. I've been wanting to get rid of this dreadful granite. Marble is so much more elegant, don't you think? Terrell sat through it all. He nodded. He smiled. He played the part of the happy, helpful, slightly dim-witted son-in-law. Every moment was a fresh betrayal, another layer of deceit piled onto the first. He was dying inside, but his face betrayed nothing. He was a man playing dumb, while his mind worked with a terrifying, cold clarity. He was no longer a victim. He was a strategist. And as he sat there, accepting their praise, which was really just a mockery of his own generosity, he was finalizing the battle plan in his head. The war would not be loud. It would be silent, procedural, and utterly devastating. And it would be fought and won with the one weapon they had completely discounted: the truth. The day after the celebration dinner, a Monday, Terrell called his boss and left a message. "Family emergency," he said into the phone. The lie felt different this time, imbued with a grim purpose. He wasn't going to a job site. He was going to war. His first stop was a modest 2-story brick building on a quiet street in downtown Jacksonville. The sign out front was simple: Franklin and Associates, PA. There was no marble, no grand fountain. The elevator was old and smelled faintly of polish. Mr. James Franklin was a man in his late 60s, with a neat graying afro and skin the color of rich, dark soil. His office was lined with books, not just law tomes, but history, philosophy, and poetry. He wore a simple, well-pressed suit that probably cost less than one of Crystal's pairs of shoes. He exuded a quiet, unshakable authority. His hourly billing rate was $450, a sum that made Terrell's stomach clench, but he knew he needed a guide, not just a lawyer. Terrell sat in a sturdy wooden chair across the massive oak desk and told his story. He started with the storm, the request from Crystal, his weekends of labor. He didn't embellish or complain. He stated facts. As he spoke, he laid out his evidence on the polished surface of the desk. First, the photos. He had taken them on his phone, as he always did, to document his work, before, during, and after shots. They showed the splintered wreckage, the careful framing of the new structure, and the finished, perfect porch. They were clear, time-stamped, and irrefutable. Next, he produced a single, crumpled receipt from his wallet. It was from the lumber yard. The total was $3,218.47. "I paid for the premium materials myself," Terrell said, his voice flat. "I didn't want to use the cheap stuff. I wanted it to last." Mr. Franklin picked up the receipt, his long fingers surprisingly gentle. He looked at it, then at Terrell. His eyes, behind a pair of simple, black-framed glasses, were deep and knowing. He had seen this story before, in 1,000 different forms. Finally, Terrell recounted the 7:22 a.m. phone call with John Collins, the claims adjuster. He repeated the name of the phantom company, T. Williams Contracting. He repeated the invoice amount, $14,000. He repeated his wife's name, the signatory on the fraudulent document. When Terrell finished, the office was silent. Mr. Franklin leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled under his chin. He was quiet for a full minute, his gaze fixed on the evidence arrayed between them. "They are charging the insurance company for the gift," Mr. Franklin said, his voice a low, rumbling bass. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir," Terrell said. "They took your labor, which you gave freely, and they have attempted to sell it," he continued. "They took your name, your professional license, and they have tied it to a criminal act. This is insurance fraud, which is a third-degree felony in the state of Florida. It is also mail fraud if they use the postal service, and wire fraud if any of this was done electronically. Hearing the cold, legal terms for what they had done sent a shiver down Terrell's spine. This wasn't just a family squabble. This was a crime. His name was in the middle of it. "What do I do?" Terrell asked. The question was a plea. Mr. Franklin leaned forward. "You have two paths, Mr. Williams. Path 1, you do nothing. You allow your wife and mother-in-law to receive $14,000. You become an unwilling but legally complicit party to their fraud. If and when this is discovered, and these things often are, your contractor's license, your very livelihood, will be in jeopardy. You could face fines, even prison time. They have made you the fall guy." The room felt suddenly cold. The fall guy. That's what he was, the useful idiot. "What's path 2?" Terrell asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Path 2," Mr. Franklin said, his eyes locking onto Terrell's, "is the truth. The truth, Mr. Williams, is not a passive thing. It is a tool. It is a weapon. But it must be wielded correctly. A loud, angry confrontation will do you no good. It will only result in denials and gaslighting. They will call you crazy. They will turn it around on you." He paused, letting the words sink in. "The correct path is procedural. It is quiet. It is devastating. We will draft an affidavit, a sworn statement, under penalty of perjury. In it, you will state the facts exactly as you have stated them to me. You will affirm that you, Terrell Williams, a licensed contractor, performed the work as a personal gift. You will state that no commercial entity was involved, no invoice was generated by you, and no payment was expected. You will sign it, you will have it notarized, and you will send it directly to the claims adjuster, Mr. John Collins." Terrell stared at him, the brilliance of the plan dawning on him. It wasn't about revenge. It was about correction. It was about resetting the board to reflect reality. "What will happen then?" Terrell asked. "Then," Mr. Franklin said, a hint of a smile touching his lips, "the truth will do its work. The claim will be denied. The $14,000 will vanish, and because a fraudulent document has been submitted, the insurance company's Special Investigations Unit will be automatically notified. They do not take kindly to being stolen from. Your mother-in-law's entire financial relationship with them will come under a very powerful, very unpleasant microscope. Her story of a hired contractor will fall apart under the weight of your sworn, truthful statement." The plan was perfect. It was clean. It used the system against them, the very system they had tried to manipulate. It protected his name, his license, and his integrity. All he had to do was tell the truth. "Draft the affidavit," Terrell said, his voice firm. The knot of anger and grief in his chest was finally uncoiling, replaced by a cold, clear sense of purpose. "Let's get to work." The strike was scheduled for Friday morning, exactly 1 month after the hurricane had passed. Terrell knew from Crystal's careless chatter that Friday was the day the insurance company was scheduled to mail the check. He imagined them waiting by the mailbox at the San Marco house, eager to collect the spoils of their deception. The thought gave him a grim, resolute strength. He woke up at 5 a.m., the sky outside his duplex window still a deep, inky black. He didn't put on his work clothes. Instead, he chose a clean, pressed button-down shirt, one of the few he owned, reserved for holidays and funerals, and a pair of dark slacks. He felt like he was attending a funeral today, the funeral for his marriage. At precisely 9:01 a.m., he walked into a small notary public's office in a strip mall off University Boulevard. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and toner. A woman with tired eyes looked up from her desk. "Can I help you?" "I need to have a document notarized," Terrell said, his voice steady. He slid the 2-page affidavit across the desk. Mr. Franklin had emailed it to him the night before. Terrell had read it a dozen times. Every word was precise, factual, and damning. I, Terrell Williams, being of sound mind and duly sworn, do hereby depose and state as follows. 1. I am a licensed contractor in the state of Florida, license number CGL 15XXXX. 2. Between the dates of September 30th and October 16th, I personally performed repair and construction work on a porch at the residence of my mother-in-law, Denise Gable. 3. This work was performed as a personal gift to my family. At no time was there an agreement for payment, nor was an invoice for services rendered ever created or submitted by me. 4. I have been made aware that an invoice for $14,000 was submitted to Atlantic Mutual Insurance under the fraudulent company name T. Williams Contracting for the work I performed as a gift. I have no association with any such company, and I did not authorize this invoice. The notary scanned the document, her expression impassive. She checked his driver's license, compared the photo to his face, and then pointed to the signature line. Sign here. Terrell picked up the pen. His hand was perfectly steady. He signed his name, his real name, the one they had tried to steal and twist for their own gain. As the notary brought down her official stamp with a satisfying thud, a wave of profound relief washed over him. The lie was no longer his to carry. He had given it back. His next stop was a FedEx Kinko's, a few miles away. The place was bustling with the sounds of modern commerce, the whir of printers, the beep of scanners. At 9:15 a.m., he fed the notarized affidavit into the scanner. He composed a new email, his fingers flying across the keyboard. To john.collins@atlanticmutual.com from twilliams.roofing@gmail.com. Subject urgent re. Claim number 78B-459-12. Factual clarification affidavit. Dear Mr. Collins, please find attached my sworn and notarized affidavit regarding the above-referenced claim. As stated in the document, the work I performed was a personal gift and not a commercial transaction. Any invoice submitted to you for this work is fraudulent. Please confirm receipt. Sincerely, Terrell Williams, FL Contractor, license number CGL 15XXXX. He attached the PDF. He took a deep breath. He clicked send. For a moment, nothing happened. The world kept turning. The printers kept whirring. But Terrell knew he had just detonated a bomb. All he could do now was wait for the shockwave. It didn't take long. He had just returned to his truck in the parking lot when his phone buzzed. It was an email notification from john.collins@atlanticmutual.com to twilliams.roofing@gmail.com. Subject re. Urgent re. Claim number 78B-459-12. Factual clarification. Affidavit Mr. Williams. Affidavit received. Thank you for your immediate clarification. No further action is required on your part. We will handle it from here. John Collins, Senior Claims Adjuster, Atlantic Mutual Insurance. We will handle it from here. The 5 most beautiful words Terrell had ever read. He leaned his head back against the seat of his old Camry and closed his eyes. It was done. The first tremor hit at 9:47 a.m., a text message from Crystal. Did you talk to the insurance company? He stared at the screen, his heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm. He didn't reply. A minute later, 9:48 a.m. Mom just got a call. The claim is on hold. What did you do? The tone had shifted from confusion to accusation. Still, he said nothing. He watched the screen, a silent observer of the chaos he had unleashed. 9:50 a.m. Terrell, answer me. Then the phone rang. Crystal's picture filled the screen, a photo from their last anniversary dinner. She was smiling, happy, oblivious. He pressed the button to decline the call. Immediately, it rang again. This time, the caller ID read Denise Gable. He declined it too. The voicemail started piling up. First Crystal, her voice frantic, confused. Terrell, what's going on? Mom is freaking out. The adjuster called her and started asking all these questions. He said something about a sworn statement. What statement? Call me back. Then Denise. Her voice was not frantic. It was pure, distilled fury. Terrell Williams, you call me back this instant. You have no idea what you've done. You have ruined everything. How dare you? After all we've done for you. All we've done for you. The irony was so thick he could taste it. He drove to a small park by the river, not the manicured, wealthy side of the river in San Marco, but a public park in a working-class neighborhood. He sat on a bench and watched the water, the phone buzzing relentlessly in his pocket. Texts and calls, a digital tidal wave of their panic and rage. A final voicemail from Crystal came through, her voice broken, crying. How could you do this to us? To me? It was just a little money, Terrell. It wasn't going to hurt anyone. It was for us, for our future. He listened to the message, and for the first time he felt a pang of something like pity. She didn't get it. She never would. She thought the crime was him telling the truth. He deleted the voicemails. He blocked their numbers. The buzzing stopped. The silence that followed was profound. It was the sound of his old life ending and his new one beginning. The sun was bright on the water. For the first time in a month, he felt like he could breathe. The consequences cascaded not with a loud crash, but with the quiet, inexorable turning of bureaucratic gears. Terrell learned about the fallout not through angry phone calls, but through a follow-up conversation with Mr. Franklin a week later. The lawyer had made some discreet inquiries. The picture he painted was one of complete and utter collapse. The first consequence was immediate and financial. John Collins, armed with Terrell's sworn affidavit, had voided the claim for $14,000. The check that was supposed to be in the mail on Friday never arrived. The expected windfall, the money that was going to pay off Crystal's $11,500 in credit card debt and fund Denise's marble kitchen dreams, simply vanished into thin air. But the denial of the claim was only the beginning. As Mr. Franklin had predicted, the submission of a fraudulent document, confirmed by a sworn statement from the very person named in the fraud, automatically triggered a referral to Atlantic Mutual's Special Investigations Unit, SIU. Think of the SIU as the insurance world's version of the FBI, Mr. Franklin explained over the phone, his voice calm and professional. They are former law enforcement forensic accountants. Their entire job is to root out fraud. Your mother-in-law is now their top priority. Denise Gable, a woman whose biggest concern a month ago was the quality of her brunch mimosa, was now the subject of a full-blown fraud investigation. The SIU didn't just look at the current claim, they opened up her entire file. They began an audit of every claim she had filed in the past 5 years. The small, questionable claim for a stolen $2,000 designer handbag after a trip to Paris. The water damage claim from a faulty ice maker line that netted her $8,000 for new hardwood floors. Every single one was now under suspicion, being re-examined with the new knowledge that the policyholder was willing to commit a felony for a mere $14,000. The financial pressure on Crystal became acute. Without the bailout from the insurance money, the $11,500 on her high-interest Visa card continued to grow, the monthly minimum payments barely making a dent. Terrell had always been the one to manage their finances, his steady hand keeping her spending from spiraling completely out of control. Now that hand was gone. Within 2 months, she missed a payment, then another. The interest rate skyrocketed. The calls from creditors started. The social consequences for Denise were, in their own way, even more devastating. The San Marco world she inhabited ran on a currency of image and reputation. The investigation was supposed to be confidential, but secrets have a way of leaking in wealthy, bored communities. A letter from the SIU, left carelessly on a counter. A tense, overheard phone call. A visit from an investigator to her home. A man in a rumpled suit asking pointed questions. A sight witnessed by a nosy neighbor. The whispers started at the yacht club, over cocktails at the country club bar. Did you hear about Denise Gable? Something about insurance? Fraud, they're saying. Her friends grew distant, invitations to dinner parties dried up. The social circle that had been the center of her universe began to close, pushing her to the periphery. The effortless wealth she projected was revealed to be a carefully constructed and now crumbling facade. An insurance fraud investigation was not elegant. It was sordid. It was common. It was everything her carefully curated life was not supposed to be. The relationship between mother and daughter, once a united front of entitlement, began to fracture under the strain. Terrell could only imagine the recriminations, the blame. Denise blaming Crystal for her sloppy execution of the plan, for signing her name to the invoice. Crystal blaming Denise for her greed, for pushing the scheme in the first place. Their alliance, built on a shared sense of superiority, could not withstand the harsh reality of their shared failure. Terrell, meanwhile, was methodically disentangling his life from theirs. He filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The process was surprisingly swift. Crystal, overwhelmed by her own financial and social implosion, didn't have the resources or the will to fight. Their assets were few and easily divided. The duplex was a rental. The furniture was mostly his. The debt was entirely hers. The most painful consequence for them was the one they never saw coming. It was the loss of him. The loss of the quiet, competent man they had taken for granted. The furnace in Denise's attic failed in the dead of winter. The roof on Crystal's new, cheaper apartment started to leak. There was no one to call. The useful man was no longer available. They were forced, for the first time, to pay market price for the kind of skilled labor they had so arrogantly dismissed. They had to hire strangers, write checks, and confront the actual non-negotiable cost of maintaining their lives, a cost Terrell had been quietly subsidizing for years. The bill, in the end, was much higher than $14,000. 2 years passed. The Jacksonville sun felt different now, warmer, more benevolent. It fell across the newly framed roofline of a small bungalow in a storm-battered neighborhood, illuminating the sawdust that danced in the air. Terrell Williams, now 39, stood on the grass, his hands on his hips, and surveyed the work. He was no longer just a roofer. He was the owner and founder of StormGuard Restoration, a fully licensed, bonded, and insured company specializing in ethical, rapid response storm repair. The name had come to him one night, a reflection of his new mission, to be a guardian for homeowners against both the fury of the weather and the predatory contractors that often followed. His old Toyota Camry was gone, replaced by a new Ford F-250, a $60,000 workhorse that was both a mobile office and a statement of his success. The side of the truck bore his company's logo, a simple, strong shield sheltering a house. His personal income had more than tripled, but the numbers on a spreadsheet were no longer his primary measure of wealth. He wasn't alone on the job site. 2 young men, apprentices in their early 20s, were on the roof, carefully laying down synthetic underlayment. Their names were Marcus and David. Terrell was teaching them the trade, not just the technical skills of swinging a hammer, but the ethics of running a business. He paid them a fair wage, well above the industry standard. He taught them about contracts, about transparent pricing, about the importance of integrity. Measure twice, cut once, he called up to them, his voice easy and confident, and make sure that flashing is seated perfectly, No shortcuts. He was mentoring them, building them up, giving them the kind of guidance and respect he had never received from his own family-in-law. He was creating a legacy, not of marble countertops and fancy cars, but of skill, character, and community. His deep brown skin was luminous in the morning sun. He was building something real. He had seen Crystal only once since the divorce was finalized. He had been in line at a Home Depot, buying supplies for a job. He heard a hesitant voice say his name. He turned, and there she was. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by simple, generic attire. Her face was thinner, etched with lines of worry that hadn't been there before. She wasn't wearing her Cartier watch. "Terrell," she said again, her voice small. "You look good?" "I'm doing okay, Crystal," he said, his voice gentle, devoid of anger. He looked at this woman who had been his wife, the center of his world, and he felt nothing. Not love, not hate, just a quiet, vast space. The wound had healed, leaving a scar he no longer felt the need to touch. I'm sorry," she stammered, twisting the strap of her cheap purse. "For everything. We were wrong." The apology, when it finally came, felt hollow, like a line read from a script she thought he wanted to hear. It was all about what she had lost, the life she thought she was entitled to. Terrell nodded slowly. He had forgiven her long ago, not for her sake, but for his. Forgiveness was the final board he had to nail down to complete his own reconstruction. It was the act of letting go of a debt he knew would never be repaid. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Crystal," he said, and he truly meant it. He wished her peace, not because she deserved it, but because he did. He paid for his materials, $850 worth of shingles and roofing nails, and walked out into the bright sunlight, leaving her standing in the aisle. He didn't look back. Now, standing in front of the bungalow, watching his apprentices work with a shared sense of purpose, he felt a profound sense of peace. He had learned the hardest lesson of his life, that your value is not determined by the assessment of others. It's not about being seen as useful. It's about building a life that is useful to yourself, a structure founded on the solid bedrock of your own integrity. True wealth wasn't something you could claim on a fraudulent form or flaunt at a country club. It was the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. It was the respect you earned from your peers and the gratitude you received from the community you served. It was the solid, unshakable knowledge that you had built your house, your business, your very life, board by board, with your own two honest hands. And it was a structure that no storm could ever tear down.